Alrighty, what's up, everybody? My name's Chance, and welcome back to the fifth week of the FNM podcast, Friday Night Magic podcast. With me this week, we have, of course, MTG Jeff and Hello Good Game.
How's it going, everybody?
For this week, we're going to be hopping into Jumpstart, talking about how it works pretty much. I know at the time of this video coming out, it'll already be released, so a lot of people have already had their hands on it and sort of be testing, playing with it. But the main thing with Jumpstart is they're releasing a ton of cards into Historic, and so we really want to touch on that and how we think that this is a great time if you're not already in Historic with the rotation coming up, with Jumpstart coming out. This is probably one of the best times for you to jump in and see what it's all about, right?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about Jumpstart. I think that when I first heard about this, I was really concerned. But learning a little bit more about how they're actually implementing it, doing everything. And again, we're talking about this a little bit before it actually hits on Arena, but of all the information that we've been able to get on this now, really excited for it. I talked about before in a previous podcast, kind of the value that Jumpstart brings to Commander, where it's something that you can just buy a couple packs, and almost every card in these packs are relevant for Commander. So it's a good thing for new players to jump into. It's something that they can maybe be taught how to play Magic, and then have cards that are actually legitimate for Commander and playable. That's something you don't get with just the cheap, easy stuff to teach people with nowadays. And so I like that this is a 40 card playable format. Like, so Jumpstart, the idea of it is there are packs that come with I think it's 20 something 20 cards, 6 to 7 lands in each pack, and it's based off of a theme where like that deck will kind of go together. You buy a second pack, whatever that other theme is, you shuffle them together. You don't really know what cards you have, and you immediately start playing against the opponent. And you can do that in paper, but they're also letting us do that on Arena as well. So they basically said that this set will be going to Commander, it'll be going to Vintage and Legacy, and also Historic coming onto Arena, which was rather surprising. There's only 20 cards that are not that are in paper that won't be on Arena. They were just a little bit too good. Things like Lightning Bolt, Reanimate, cards that were just a little bit too powerful. We do have a list of what the new cards will be there. I think we've already kind of mentioned those in a previous podcast, so I won't dive too deep here. But just giving a little bit more of the overview of what actually is happening here with Jumpstart on Arena. Same type of thing here. I know a lot of people are really concerned that you can't just like buy packs and get all the cards you want for Jumpstart. But at the same time, if you're trying to get into Historic, if you're trying to actually build up that card base where it wasn't really easy to do or fun to do with Standard or jumping in beforehand, because if you're a new player, you only put so much into your Arena card base. You're not going to have a lot of cards for Historic. With that being said, I think they're doing this in a really fun way. So for 2,000 gems, you can buy, you get to play the Jumpstart format. So you get to play, get 2 packs, mash them together, and play in an event where you play against other people with those that did the exact same thing. So 2,000 gold, which is the exact same amount as buying 2 packs, in the store. So you can do this once a day, once every other day type of thing. You can be playing this if you want to, and be able to go into an event. I'm sure there's going to be rewards enough to where it's worthwhile to be doing it, and get cards for Historic format. All these cards are going to be relevant because there's 500 new cards that are coming into this, and you're going to be able to get some new fun stuff. So anyway, I'm kind of excited what's actually going to be going on with this, in basically how it's being introduced to MTG Arena. But with that said, you can get some new cards. You can be jumping into Arena Historic a little bit. But let's actually dive into how crazy these 500 new cards that are being dumped into Arena for Historic are, and actually dive into how much this is going to be changing the format.
Well, one thing real quick, Jeff. One nice thing. This is one thing that stood out to me about Jumpstart. It's really, really beginner friendly, and I know there's some people that claim that Magic is pay to win because you got to go get the rares and you have to spend and get so many packs to get the rare wild cards. The nice thing about Jumpstart is nobody's packs they're opening are going to be, I mean, obviously there will eventually be like these are the 2 best packs or whatever, but nobody's going to have that leg up. Nobody's going to win because they've been playing Magic longer, because they spent $100 extra than you. Like you said, you paid the 2,000 gold, and everybody's everybody's at the same starting line, and that's what I really enjoy about the format. It's not like this guy that's been playing 30 years is going to beat you because he's been playing for 30 years. As long as you play smart, you play your cards how you should, you have the same chance out the gate as anybody else.
And also too, so they let you choose between 4 different packs, looks like, or 4 different themes. So as you open up, you go into it, and you basically have an option to choose between a few different themes, what your 2 themes are going to be. And within each theme, you can kind of choose which cards you want. So even if you are looking for new cards, new stuff, you know that you've already played the dog theme like 15 times and have all the dogs that you want, you may want to switch it over and be looking at the tree hugger theme. And we're not going to go through every single theme here. I think that that's something that it's been around for quite a while. You can look it up on the internet. I think it wouldn't behoove you for us to dive too far into each of the different cards in each theme, that kind of stuff. Maybe in the future if people are really wanting it, but just kind of show what we wanted to talk about now is why is Jumpstart the time to be jumping into Historic? Historic has been this set that, or the format that has been growing in interest lately. It came out just a little bit after Pioneer came out, and Pioneer was a big thing, and Historic was so similar, it felt like, to what Pioneer was, that people were almost staying more on MTG Online and not actually jumping over to Arena to play Historic. It was just something that was there because they didn't want you to feel bad about all your cards rotating during the last rotation, type of thing. But now we're coming up onto this new time where rotation is about to happen again. First off, and so a lot of the cards that you have, a good chunk of them, everything after, is it War of the Spark? War of Spark and before is all being rotated out. I think Core Set 2020 as well, are all going to be rotated out come next set with Zendikar Rising in September 2020. And then, so all these cards that you have, and you have a good amount of cards there, you can start playing with those in Historic. And that's typically when people start jumping more into Historic, is if they've been around for the last set. If you're a newer player, haven't played in Arena that long, you may want to stick more in Standard, but Jumpstart is a good way to start building cards for it. Playing in Send right now is a great way to start building up cards in a card base for Historic. And also, just I think that there's going to be a lot of players staying around and sticking in and focusing on Historic in general, because I think Historic is a great format.
Yeah, Historic and this Jumpstart idea, I feel like, to me, it's not necessarily an immediate plan or a goal for them. It's more of a long-term thing where they are just trying to sort of insert these extra cards in Historic and get it closer to a modern feel, where it's like, oh, there's tons of decks to play. There's something for everybody, so to speak. But the real nice thing about Jumpstart is I'm losing my wording here, the ability to spend the 2,000 gold that you would normally on a pack to enter into a format that would otherwise be deemed scary, right? Because if anybody's looking as a new player back into Historic, the first thing you go to see in the first game is like 3-mana Teferi and 5-mana Teferi and all these very daunting cards. What I like about Jumpstart is you're gonna get some of those powerhouses just with the 2,000 gold, because they're kind of ensuring, right, that each of these themes has that punch, right? So I really enjoy the fact that Historic is going to have a higher power level just in general based off its format. I like the fact that they're trying to allow newer players to match that power without having to spend bukus of money, right?
I have so many things to say.
Yeah.
Of the 500 new cards that we're getting in Jumpstart, 417 of these bad boys are reprints from old Magic the Gathering arenas or Magic the Gathering sets. They're not in Arena. They're all going to be new to Arena. Some of them are in sets currently available to Arena, I should say.
So there's 300 cards that are new, haven't been on Arena yet, but 500 cards in the set altogether.
Okay, perfect. And then the packs come with 20 cards, but 8 of those cards are going to be land. So I think the value is exactly the same, because it looks like the reward structure is split into 2. You get 1 card reward for 1 win, and then a second for 2, and then you can re-enter the event for another 2,000 gems. So that is literally the exact same value. The only thing is a way better value. How many gems is it?
It's 400 gems and 2,000 gold.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the only downside is that you're gonna have to play matches to get the value in cards, so it's not quite as quick as just opening packs. The game's about playing it, right? And then you're also getting access to all these new cards. That was my first thought. Second thought was that even though it is a closed environment, you're playing basically pre-constructed decks against pre-constructed decks that are going to be relatively balanced in power levels. It is very friendly for beginners for that aspect. However, the guy who's been playing Magic for 30 years is still going to stomp you because he's been playing Magic for 30 years. He's got so much experience. He knows all the nuances, the ins and outs. He probably has a full grasp on the entire meta's environment already. He knows how to interact with you. There's no getting around that. Just keep practicing. It's okay. You're going to, in a couple years, you'll be really good too. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure I'll run into more things here. I had a whole bunch of stuff listed. I should have wrote it down.
Yeah, so I mean, Jumpstart's gonna be cool. I think that I'm really excited that they are bringing the event of just being able to open Jumpstart packs going into it. Do we know how long that's gonna be lasting? If it's gonna be something that comes like back and forth, or if it's gonna keep going?
I was about to say the only thing they've said so far is that it'll last for a month, and they don't plan on. So far, they have zero plans on allowing you to ever purchase like just the open pack. So yeah, it is. That's the thing that I'm very hesitant on. Is like the event's only going to be open for a month, and is this going to be test waters where eventually they'll come back and allow you to buy the packs and do whatever? Because if that's the case, then I'm hesitant to recommend it to people and be like, hey, go spend 2,000 gold and hope that you get the theme packs, when a month after it's released they may come back and be like, hey, now you can buy whatever packs you want because we figured out that this is the best way to do it. So on the one hand, I'm a huge fan of it, but I'm also a content creator, and I feel like we all three have a little bit of a biased opinion on it, since we aim to play the game every day. We love to play the game every day. That's why we're here doing it. So the fact, that you have to play to get it, not only do you have to invest the money, you have to invest the time. So I think that'll be the biggest drawback for people, and the fact that it's only lasting a month, and Wizards hasn't given enough information to let us know, is it going to be a better value if we just wait on it, or should we grab it now? Because if we wait on it, the only way to get it is wildcards, and that's even harder than paying the 2,000 gold.
One thing with wildcards though is that this set actually has a lot of really powerful cards in the uncommon and common slot, where there's a lot of reprints that are worth like $20, or prints that have never been printed before in the uncommon slot, that in paper, I think there's one uncommon that's like $25 and type of thing, where it's like, but in here it's just in an arena, it's just one uncommon wild card, which is a lot easier to hit, or common wild cards. And so there is that side of it where the uncommons and commons are going to be pretty easy to hit with this set. They are pretty powerful. And some of them even at the same value. I think some of them actually were rares and demoted down to commons or uncommons as they were reprinted in this set. So like there is at least some value in that. At the same time, every Jumpstart pack, all the different themes have a rare in them or a mythic or whatever. So yes, it is going to be a little bit of an issue there, where wild cards are going to come into play over being able to just do the Jumpstart event. With that said, though, I think that the Jumpstart event sounds really fun. just like how you're saying, like, I think that people, this is something that I think is exciting for beginners, exciting for that. But you were just saying people that have been playing this for 30 years will be jumping into this event. I think that this is something that, especially playing with cards that were around forever ago, the reprints, it's all this stuff where people are excited to play with all the stuff that's coming back. Like, it's a really fun, exciting set where I think that it's going to bring a lot of interest towards playing in this new format. And the thing that I'm probably most excited for is jumping into Historic and having 300 brand new cards to start brewing with, 300 powerful new cards. That's the thing I'm really pumped for here, is we get to brew with so much new power. And how much do you guys think this will affect the Historic metagame?
Oh, it's just
A ton.
yeah.
Well, first off, there are bans as well. Before we jump too far into that, bans also are going to affect this a little bit. So just recently, we had the ban announcements for Nexus of Fate being banned in Best of 3 finally, not just in Best of 1, and then Burning Tree Emissary being suspended. The cards that were suspended beforehand went to ban, so everything but Burning Tree Emissary, I think, is now banned. Burning Tree Emissary will completely shake the format because Gruul Aggro was the deck that was played for forever, and that was the reason that deck was played. So first off, we already know meta is going to change completely. Having that happen at the same time, 300 new cards are coming into play. What? This is a new set. No one knows what's going to be the new deck.
Yeah.
Not really.
I was about to say, didn't was it Jeff or one of y'all two had mentioned the fact that I think this is coming out before the Arena Open, isn't it? Yeah. I think if you're a new player and you're looking to get into Historic / you're like, halfway there, you're riding the fence, just wait for that Historic Open and see, because that'll be a great place to test the field. And equally so, don't just copy the first deck that someone posts and it's like, hey, I did it, I won, because that deck will probably immediately be countered by the next person that's like, oh, okay, well, got you figured out.
Yeah. I've mentioned that a lot of the reprints, I think that's going to drive a huge amount of people into playing not only Jumpstart, but Historic afterwards. I myself haven't really been playing that long, since the old Theros. So a little bit, but like a lot of these reprints, I don't recognize. They're brand new to me. But there's people out there, and a lot of people out there, who have that nostalgic connection with that card, and they're like, oh my God, I remember that deck. Right? I'm coming into Arena. I'm going to try and make that deck as close as I can. We're getting a whole bunch of people from that direction. And then we're getting all of the beginners, because they want these new powerful cards that are able to compete and shape the meta, as well as playing in a fair playing field, right? I know some people dislike draft a little bit, but it's really the best place for you guys to be learning how to play the game, interact the different archetypes and mechanics, etc. Just because it is such a fair playing field as far as card collection goes, right? You're all opening from the same amount of packs. Yes, their picks may be better than yours, but it's not like you have no rares and someone's coming down on you with like Esekai Super Friends deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, winning is much more tangible there in the drafts, because you can just always pick better. That's something that you do have control over. Go ahead.
And then we mentioned how they have no plans to bring this back. I think that it will be a rotating format. We don't see a Dominaria drafts very often, but they still will rotate once in a blue moon. It might be 3 or 4 months in between the events when we do get them. And the first one may be a month, and the second one may only be a week, perhaps, right? But Wizards isn't a company who's keen to losing money, and if there is as much hype behind this as we think there'll be, it'll definitely be something that they not only continue to bring back with Jumpstart, but like Doctor mentioned earlier, how he feels that they're kind of testing the waters to see how the community and their client base is going to react to these old cards being brought into the new arena. I think the snowball's already been pushed off the top of the hill and nobody notices it yet. I think it's snowballing. I'm sorry, MTG Go. Many apologies, but I think this is it, and I think it's gonna be really good. People are really gonna enjoy it, and this is the beginning of a new era. And it's at a great time, you guys. If you've been playing Standard for the last couple months, we're coming into renewal season, which means you're gonna get rewards for the cards that you lose from your Standard collection that go into Historic, which you get to keep anyways. So we're talking spare wild cards, which is awesome, and then all of the new Jumpstart cards, which Jeff mentioned. A lot of the powerhouses are common and uncommon, right? So we do a lot of the times showcase free-to-play beginner decks on each of our channels for you guys. I know we're going to be doing more of that content based on the Historic. So stay tuned for that. And it's, like I said, it's going to be a great time. The next year in Arena is going to be absolutely crazy. I'm really looking forward to it. And
let's talk a little bit about the next year as well. I think that we can dive into Jumpstart quite a bit, and we'll do that kind of for the end of this. But just real quick, just to lay out the rest of this year, what it looks like. First off, Jumpstart's hitting. You guys just barely had it. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but Jumpstart just barely hit. historic change forever. On August 1st, we're getting the tournament coming out, and then so that's August 1st, and then sometime in August, I don't think we actually have the exact date yet, but Amonkhet Remastered will be coming back to Arena. So when Arena first hit, like I jumped in back during the alpha. I think Dr. Spilkin was in there as well, where it was Amonkhet, Kaladesh. It was during that standard set, and we were able to play with all those cards. And then once rotation hit, going from Ixalan and forward, that's when beta started. And then as soon as the next rotation hit, they went to the full game being open to everybody. And the beta was basically available for everybody, so it was kind of meh. But anyway, so it's kind of exciting what's happening here. So Amonkhet is finally being brought back to Arena. We already knew that they had the cards available here, but they started Historic being only Ixalan and forward. Being able to bring it back a little bit forward, a little bit more, everything like that, will still shift everything. So yeah, Jumpstart has a lot of power. Oh yeah, first off, still going with the year here. So that's in August, and then September, Zendikar Rising is happening, and rotation happens the same time that Zendikar Rising comes out. So that's you said September 25th is when Zendikar Rising comes out.
Paper is going to be a little bit earlier.
Yeah. So the paper releases then, Arena releases a little bit earlier. But so Zendikar Rising, another fun set. But the biggest thing here is that Standard will lose a ton of cards, and a lot of people will have more cards to be able to play a little bit more in Historic. Again, this is why we're bringing Historic up a little bit more in this, where we're excited for Jumpstart because it's a new set. It brings a lot of stuff to Historic, but we're really excited because we are seeing a lot of drive. There's going to be a lot more reason for more people to be playing in Historic after this. A couple of things here. So that's at least why we're hyped. That's why we're excited. That's why we're talking about it here today. Is that we play Arena a lot, and we want to play the most fun thing. And I think that we all kind of agree that Historic is going to boost up in funness in the next 3 months, at least. Once Zendikar hits, I mean, new cards with Zendikar will also increase the Historic, trough of awesome cards to be brewing and playing with. So that's at least why the excitement is there. A couple things you're talking about. So with Jumpstart being crazy powerful type stuff, Jumpstart cards are crazy powerful for Commander. I think that it really was all the cards were built and picked and handpicked for the Commander format. At the same time, though, so I feel like that it doesn't necessarily mean every single card is powerful for Standard. Like Oracle of Moldiah, we had talked about it in the past, where it's a crazy powerful card, but it's also a 4-drop slot that does things that in Standard I'm not necessarily sure is powerful to be doing at turn 4 or in Historic in a constructed format. Oracle of Moldiah has been around like in Historic, but not necessarily, Modern, but not necessarily played. So I'm really intrigued to see which of these actually 300 new cards that were coming in will actually affect the meta, will actually affect the ranked or the power gameplay. At the same time, though, I think that those 300 new cards will create so many more opportunities for new decks, for interesting decks, for whatever deck you want to build based off what you have in your arsenal and your card meta, your card base.
No, I may have misheard you, but these cards from Jumpstart are only available within Historic. There'll be no standard play of them. I could have misheard you there, but to make that clear.
Yes, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So only playable in Historic. I was talking a little bit about them being built mostly for Commander initially.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So that's where it is. Like I feel like this set was reprinted. All these cards were there initially because they wanted it for Commander. I think the Wizards kind of looked at the whole idea of being able to just buy 2 packs, shuffle them together, and play as a really fun idea for Arena. And I think that they focus on that, which I'm actually really stoked for. I think it's gonna be fun. And they figured, well, if people are gonna have these cards, might as well throw them into Historic as well. And whatever happens type of thing. They'll ban 20 cards that were a little bit too powerful, that kind of thing, and that's okay. I think that's actually really cool. I'm really excited to see how this ends up turning out with Historic. Do you guys think, though, that as far as meta goes, these cards will have the same or more of an effect, or some of them are more powerful than just some like the Historic anthology cards? Because I'm thinking Soul Sisters, I'm thinking Sarah Ascendant, I'm thinking Phyrexian, Obliterator, like those cards completely changed the meta. Where I'm not sure even in the 300 new cards here that there are that many cards that are as busted as some of the ones that came out just in Historic Anthology or Historic meta.
I think a lot of it is, fluff to help them build out like the themes, right? So dogs, well, let's just throw a few extra dogs in there that are pretty good or okay or whatever. So I think a lot of them will be, fluff. But the same as any set goes, whenever they drop a set of 300 cards and there's only like, 7, 8 that make it into the meta, like you got to go in. If you're looking to be competitive in Historic with these cards, you got to go in thinking about what they're facing off against in the current meta. Like Jeff says, Soul Warden, Burning Tree just got banned, but you have to compare them at a 1-to-1 ratio. Would I rather be casting this new card simply because it's new, or because it's actually going to be bringing me more value or more efficiency or more consistency or whatever it may be that you're looking for, right? And one thing I wanted to touch on with Historic and everything rotating, Magic is the first game I've ever played, and I feel like this is the same for a lot of newer players, where your assets, the money you put in, gets shifted around. And I gotta say, when the first renewal season, the first shifting to Historic and all that happened, I was worried as hell. I just spent all this money into it and all that. I will say this: Historic and these older game modes, dive into them. Don't be so afraid if you're a newer player that, okay, I just actually lost all these because I don't want to go learn a whole nother format. Historic isn't such a huge leap that it's like all new waters. You're still playing lands. You're still trying to follow the same basic deck building advice that you would before, right? Making sure you hit your making sure you keep your deck objective in mind. So like when you're going into Jumpstart, when you're going into Historic, don't be so fearful to just play a regular standard deck, or add 1 or 2 cards here or there, and then see what your opponent's playing and learn based off that. I know, like I said, me personally, when all my stuff got shifted to Historic, I was a little worried that it wasn't going to be as fun or as playable, but I still find myself going back and playing those decks. And my girlfriend, she loves Historic even more than Standard because it has all of the cards that she knew whenever I first started playing and she sort of played with. So
right.
We're talking about the power level and changing the meta. I think it will. I think there's a lot of good cards in here. They're maybe not shaping the meta like we see Teferi 3 in 60% of the decks, but there are specific cards that will shape specific decks, like and in different ways. I really see an overarching theme of tribal, right? Like we see a lot of really powerful elves. We see a lot of very powerful goblins, for example, right?
Unicorns.
So I think unicorns.
I think
that maybe there aren't these crazy cards like Soul Warden or Phyrexian Obliterator that are single-handedly change the meta, and this is what the black deck plays, this is what the white deck plays. But I think that they're just underneath that power level where it's like, you know what, now goblins is incredibly viable. Now you can play elves and have a chance, right? And even combo cards, like I know we talked about this in the last podcast where Exquisite Blood comboed with Veto of the Duskthorn, right? So I think there's just a ton of possibilities, a ton of new interactions, literally limitless things for us to discover. Maybe not limitless, but close to.
Yeah.
There's more things to discover that we will do before the next set comes out, right? Like there's literally not enough time for us as creators to put out every piece of content that we want to put out, especially now, since they're not only doing the standard releases into Arena, which would be the full environment normally, but we're getting all of these additional sets pumped in as well. So we're working double time, you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm already putting out 10 videos a week, and I'm thinking I'm popping up to 14, or we'll see. There's so much content to be. There's so many fun things to be doing with Jumpstart, and again, like there are, I think you hit it right on the nail. And kind of rephrasing what I was saying before is, I think what Jumpstart did is filled out a lot of the decks that weren't necessarily crazy powerful beforehand. Like Elves was a deck that you saw played on Historic, and it was powerful enough to win games. But Gruul aggro is one of those decks that just typically won. Like I remember, like me ranking, I ranked up to Mythic a couple different times, and it was in Historic rather than Standard because the Gruul deck was just so powerful. It was one of those that just it consistently hit because it had all the pieces. I think that first off, Purgatory Emissary being gone from that is awesome. But then there's going to be so many decks available to be powerful here in the next set, because I really feel like Core Spirit Dancer is another card that will completely create a new archetype, having auras be worth playing again. There's, like you're saying, Elves, Unicorns being awesome again. The Veto and Exquisite Blood infinite combo is going to be a thing. And we were talking about this in the past, but this is what I'm always really excited for with new sets. Is I feel like there's a lot when there are a lot of tier 1 decks versus very few tier 1 decks. And I think that Jumpstart is going to be helping with that. I think that I think that people get tired of a meta that is like, okay, you're either playing Vantramp or Mono Red Aggro or Rakdosak or what, right? And on Standard, I think there's 4. Yeah, so it's like there's only so many decks you can really play, and like people have had issues with Standard with that. I do think that there's a lot of tier 2 decks in Standard right now that are knocking at the door of the tier 1 realm. That's the one thing I'm actually I'm kind of content with Standard right now, because there are a lot of other decks that are on the fringe there that are interesting, and I think it's because there's so many sets in the format right now. With Historic, I think that there was kind of an issue where you were running up against the mono white life gain aggro. You're running up against Screw aggro, mono black, and then there was like a few other decks that you ran into. So there's still more decks there available. But with Jumpstart coming into play, I think that it'll expand the top tier list of different decks that are in the top tier, or at least good top tier 2 decks that you are going to be able to play. Probably 60 different decks and have them all be potentially tier 1, tier 2. Which that's not something you always get, in formats. And so really, really excited for that, to see just how many different decks we can bring up to tier 1 level. And I think we'll be discovering it for the next year with this set.
Honestly, that's my favorite part of Magic. I know that we all play Standard a lot. You got to hit that Mythic badge or get upset with you, but you know what you're playing every time. It's the first land played. It's like, oh wow, there's a breeding pool. Can't wait for Growth Spiral into an Uro, into an Issa. Like, just you already know the exact play line of the whole match that's going to take place. This, you're going to be sitting down. Like Jeff said, the diversification of all of the top tier decks are going to be so deep and vast that you never know what you're going to be playing against. It could be anything, right? And like, for me, that makes it almost more lifelike, where you walk into like a Friday Night Magic, you have no idea what these scrubs are playing, right? And you sit down with your deck that you've been working on, and you're gonna beat them. So it really ups that fun value, which is another reoccurring theme on all of our shows, is that you gotta have fun. You have to keep the game fresh and interesting. I think Jumpstart is everything that we've been looking for the last year.
Aye.
So all that being said, I'm just gonna sort of spin off on another topic. I hope y'all don't mind. Do y'all think they'll do this again? You think they'll do a whole another like different set of cards? Yeah, you're like wholeheartedly yes.
You buy it, they will do it, and I'm buying it, so they will do it. It's like, it's not even super expensive. Like, we've seen the Premier Draft come out, and yeah, it looks like there seems to be more rares in the picks because people are trying to be more competitive because they're against real people. So now it's important to win. But it's pretty expensive. This is nice and cheap. This is the exact same value. So we get great cards.
That's what I was about to say.
You probably don't.
Compare this to something like Historic Anthology, where, what is it, 10,000 gold to get a whole Historic Anthology set. This you could play 5 times and have 5 or 10 different.
It's 25,000 gold, isn't it?
Oh man, yeah. So you really get your values worth in this, right? You get 12 plays basically of this.
Do we know the rewards from the play? I haven't seen that really, but yeah,
It's in the video. We're gonna have a link to that for you guys in the description here. It's just a quick video overviewing it. It's about a minute and a half long only, and you get one rare on one win, and then it looks like another rare on your second win. And I'm sure these also have the chance to upgrade to a mythic.
Yeah, so for everyone that looked at Historic Anthology and was like, yo, I'm not spending 25,000 gold on 15 cards, I think this is them trying to meet you in the middle and saying, hey, you can play this 12 times, hit 24 different themes or packs, right? And get 24 different feels of deck possibilities, right?
It's still okay with the anthologies. You get 4 of every card.
Yeah. I mean, the anthologies
okay,
are
and
still
most of them
good,
are rare.
They didn't add, for me at least, you spent 25,000, and then if you didn't have the rest of the cards to build out the rest of the anthology decks, right? Because the anthology sort of brought one piece to a deck, then you just spent 25,000 for 4 one pieces, if that makes sense.
I think one thing that'll be interesting too with Jumpstart, I think unfortunately they won't add to the wheel of adding to wildcards. So you are paying 2,000 gold to get 2 packs, and you get some good stuff in those packs. And I do like that you're able to kind of choose which theme you're going for, so you can kind of choose if you're wanting to get more of the same thing or more new things by doing that. So you can kind of like draft, or not draft, but like rare draft is how a lot of people do it, where they kind of choose different things or for the specific what they're looking for.
You'll also get a minimum of 4 rares here because you'll pull a minimum 1 rare from each of your packs, and then the 2 rewards. So
if you're winning,
yes, there is no loss as well. You do get to play until you get your 2 wins, at which point you can continue to play. So you don't have to, if you don't have the gold and you still want to play with your deck, you can keep playing. Or if you're looking to farm the event and collect all those cards, once you've got your 2 wins, you just resign and now re-enter. Gotcha. It's really nice. There's no like, oh, you lost 3 times, you're out.
I really do feel like they're trying to make it make sense to be jumping into historic. Like that's what I keep feeling like with this set, where I've so many people I feel like have been jumping in really hating this set, or just hating Wizards in general for coming out with more sets so often. I mean, we were talking about, Jumpstart this month. We just barely got Core Set 21, Amonkhet Remastered coming out, and then also all the Secret Layers as well as Undercard Rising coming out later. Like there's a lot of products going on. It is true. It's a lot. I think that for us, we focus on Arena for this purpose, where it's like I feel like I can get lost in the weeds if I'm trying to play tons of different formats at the same time. I've kind of limited I feel like I'm doing what a lot of people have been doing. They've limited paper down to just Commander for the most part. Maybe a Pioneer deck here and there or something like that, or Modern. But then Arena is kind of the new standard, and I'm kind of hoping that it almost takes over Modern and Pioneer, in my opinion, just because, at least as far as playing something else there, because I've never been able to jump into Modern or Pioneer because it's $1,000 deck to be able to be competitive most of the time. It's like, or to be able to play something different than the Goblin aggro goblins, type of stuff. Where if you're wanting to play something new, have a format that is eternal, that will always have interesting stuff going on, and luckily be digital, which means that they can roll out bans and everything like that to fix the format a little bit more consistently and easily. Which, by the way, I hope they do more often. To be able to kind of make this meta work really well, to have it be a safe place to be able to play consistently. They will always be getting new content, or new cards into it. So I really think that, just like you guys are saying, like I think we all can have this passion for it. Guys, you should be trying to play Historic. You should be investing in a deck for Historic, because right now Historic is the place. It is the place to go. You might be wanting to look into it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the main concern I guess people have with the idea of like, hey, push out more sets and then push out more bans is it's not so much the cards that get banned themselves, like when Agent of Treachery got banned, because you get those wild cards back. it's the cards that you may invest into to make those cards work that don't get banned that I feel like a lot of people get upset about. So I go back and forth on the bans because, like, yes, I want it to be a very fun format, but I also don't want people to feel like they're getting robbed, like, right after they built the deck, and then, okay, well, now I have 4 copies of Luca and never going to play him again.
They do usually refund the wild cards for if you have those ones or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. You'll get them for the card that was banned, but not for the supporting card that you also picked up because everyone was saying, oh, well, if you're going to play this deck, you have to have this Luca. So,
yeah, that's what you're saying, yeah.
That being said, as soon as the announcements hit every single time, go out and spend your wild cards on the cards that are getting banned, crush them for a week, and then get your wild cards back. At least have that experience with, no buyer's remorse, right?
Like
that's
that.
a great silver lining.
You may not want to get the supporting cards, but it'll still be fun. Nexus of Fate will still work.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about some decks that you guys think will hit the top tier or 2 in Jumpstart, in Historic with Jumpstart coming in. Because a lot of things have changed. Gruul Aggro kind of fizzling out with Burning Emissary. I'm not sure if it's even in the running anymore for tier 1 necessarily. So what are some of the decks you guys think are in top tier? We don't have to hit every single one because, like I said, I think there's going to be a lot. But what are a few of them?
Are we talking about with Jumpstart or without it?
Yeah, with Jumpstart.
Oh, man.
I think Elves are going to go there just based on the new cards and it being a new meta that's not really super explored yet, right? Like there's going to be these weird value engines that are able to just outpace everyone off the start until it really starts to define itself. I think Elves and Goblins both do that in opposite ways very, very well. So I think
Elves got another Lord that will really work well with it, and then also a mana sink and a 1-drop that could, which is kind of what they were needing. They needed something to have a mana sink to turn. What is it? They turn all elves into dinosaurs, and then you swing in. Is kind of the game plan with that. Like, there's some
end of turn
with elves right now. Yeah.
Each creature you control has base power and toughness of 5/5 and becomes a dinosaur in addition to its other types. And that's for 6.
If there's a bunch of lords out, they become 6/6 because 7/7 based off the number of lords you have. So yeah, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's a 1/1 for 1. It can't be countered, and then green spells you control can't be countered. So yeah.
So yeah, elves up there. You have goblins. What else?
As much as people may not like it, I think mono white weenies will still actually stick around, or a version of weenies, because we have a 2/2 creature coming out for 1 mana, which is already solid. Mono white weenies, decks of this.
Mono white life gain is always going to be a thing. Or Sarah Ascendant, there's so many good cards. Soul Warden, Johnny's Pride Mate. That game plan's always going to be good.
Yeah. The idea of building a deck so efficiently as far as cost goes alongside the value you're getting out of it is always going to maintain. So I think, we'll still see mono red aggro. It just may be changed from the current mono red aggro where it's focused on like Annex and Embercleave to, like y'all say, a bit more goblins. And mono white might change into more of a mono white weenies, mostly dogs, because they have the Issa Maru, right? Hound of Condor, whatever it is.
I can see Core Spirit Dancer being a card as well, like an Auras deck. We've already kind of seen Luris Auras, like mono white Luris Auras, be a really powerful archetype. I think that you can do something. I think there's going to be a deck very similar to that comes out in Historic, and with Core Spirit Dancer adding the card draw and the explosiveness of it getting +2/+2 for every aura that's attached to it, will create a really powerful auras deck. If it's going to be Boros, adding in like Champion of Flame, which is the way I'm going to go with it, that kind of stuff, or going like different colors, or if it stays mono white, like what deck actually comes out of it, I'm not sure, but there's going to be a Core Spirit Dancer deck that's in the top tier. I'm pretty sure of it.
How do y'all feel about spirits? We're getting a new spirit, or I guess rather an old spirit, that allows you to cast your other spirits as though they had flash. We've seen this kind of effect in the past of casting creatures at flash speed being really good, allowing you to hold up counter spells. Not only to mention that, but it also gives one of your spirits hexproof whenever it enters the battlefield, and it's only 2 mana. I'm talking about Rattle Chains, by the way, for y'all if you want to look into it. But Yeah. What
I
about
think
spirits?
a lot of the other archetypes, like goblins, like elves, got huge buffs to the point where they might be sitting at tier 1.5, like right under the top decks. But spirits, I feel like it's not getting the buff. There's not enough there yet. I think, and it will maybe come into play in the future sets, right? Get released into historic. I like that card. I was looking at that earlier, and I went through. I was looking for all these spirits, and I don't think that there's going to be enough to really fill it out like we could with goblins or with elves.
I think it'll be a good tempo deck, and I think it depends on if it fits the meta right. Spirits will be, I think it depends on whether or not that's going to be the tempo deck, or if it's just your typical mono blue tempo type of thing, or whatever. There's a lot of good tempo decks out there, kind of already. Spirits can definitely fill in that slot, and in, like you said, either be like jump into the top tier one if they find enough of the right tempo cards. I feel like, or kind of just hang a little bit underneath. Kind of depending on if how aggressive the meta is. If it is more aggressive, tempo doesn't always work great against a deck that already gets down 5 power before they can actually start interacting with stuff. Like and swinging in, dealing the damage. But it really depends. Are there really any control decks you see coming into historic? We know that we already have all the Teferis that have been around for forever. There's a bunch of stuff coming into it. There's always going to be some control, but is it too soon to talk about Amonkhet and Approach of the Sun coming?
There definitely could be. Looking at it, there's Witch of the Moors, because I'm just going through the cards.
Yeah.
At the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature and you return up to one target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. The vibe that I'm getting is like Rakdos Sacrifice is being pushed towards that. I don't want to say it has to be played mid range. I still think Rakdos Sacrifice, keeping it low to the ground, is great. But I like seeing cards that allow current meta decks to sort of push into different archetypes. Does that make sense? So like we have Bont Ramp or whatever. If I see areas that allow Bont to become more efficient as far as creatures go and that kind of stuff, maybe it goes into a Bont mid-range. And I think that's a bit more of a stretch than Rakdos going to a mid-range from a sacrifice deck. But Witch of the Moors got me thinking, like, I wonder how many flavor cards, how many utility cards, right, are going to come out of this set, and we won't notice, like y'all said, until a year later when somebody's like, oh hey, by the way, I tried this and it was bonkers.
I mean, when it comes to the tier, like top tier is always all about consistency. If it can win games 60% of the time versus the 50% of the time, or 55, that's the biggest thing, is that's what ends up being top tier in top of the meta. But I think Witch of the Moors, doing that with Priest of Forgotten Gods, doing that with Witches Up, and whatever, there's a deck there that has got to be good. It's something that will win games because it's just a powerful effect. If you're playing up against a creature deck, that's dang powerful. What I think I'm really excited for too is I've not really been jumping into best of 3 as much lately because I feel like I've not enjoyed it in standard as much. There's some decks that I just don't want to play 3 games against it, or too many games, or I'd rather get through it quick and play the other stuff. In historic, I feel like that's a format where I'm going to be wanting to bring in, a full sideboard, full and all that kind of stuff. So, and I honestly think that like best of 3 will start being played maybe a little bit more in historic. I still like best of 1. I love that is available to us, that we can play quick games. That was one of the things I hated about only playing Paper Magic, was that it was always only best of 3, and they dragged on. Like I would play a Paper Magic game for an hour and a half sometimes, and it was just like it was great when you won it. Those long games were grindy, they're fun, and it's great when you win. But I hated going to turns and losing to them having one more life than I did. That kind of thing.
We're touching on what decks we think we're going to be in the top of the meta, and I almost feel like it's too vast to go into, like we first mentioned. There's going to be, what, maybe 40 plus decks that are viable within tier 1, tier 2 that all interact with each other quite nicely. I think a lot of decks that are already huge staple marks, like we've got Tempo Blue is doing really well. Make Flash. There may not be a ton of things that change to that deck with the introduction of these cards. It doesn't mean that they're not viable. The fact that it doesn't have new cards in it doesn't mean that it's going to interact any differently because of the style of deck that it is, right? I think that's something to touch on. And then I was thinking that Mono Blue would be great in the meta. And then I was thinking also Mono Black Devotion will be pretty cool. And then went on to the Rakdos Sacrifice lane. And then I came full circle to there's going to be a lot of really cool decks to play.
I think that Veto and Exquisite Blood infinite combo with life gain or whatever, that's going to be a deck that's special. I'm actually worried that that's going to be a bannable good card. Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that. We'll see. But so real quick too, we're talking about meta, but what for people that are jumping into Historic, people that are coming in, what are decks that you probably already have cards for, that you've probably already built in Standard, that maybe with filling in a few extra different removal spells or things like this here and there are going to be good in Historic as well? The first one that comes to mind for me is like Teamer Adventure. It's just a powerful deck. It's going to win games. It may not be tier 1 at 60%, but I kind of have a hard time seeing it not still being around 50%, even maybe cleaning it up a little bit here and there with extra cards. But for the most part, you probably already have a lot of those cards, and Teamer Adventure is still going to be good, and it still is good right now, probably in Historic.
I'm going to take the easy route and say Mono Red. It's already real cheap, right? Go to Historic. I'm sure you can find still cheap routes that are a little bit stronger. I know, what is it? Chain Lightning or Lightning Bolt? That one's not being transferred over, but there's going to be tons of other options, and there's already very good mono red decks that are budget friendly in Historic. You got mono red Burn, mono red Aggro, Cavalcade.
I just recognize with Amonkhet coming, we're going to get Hazoret back in mono red. Oh no.
Yeah, we mentioned on Bridge the Gap between the player base and Historic, right? And it is a good time to be doing that to get everybody kind of in the mindset of accomplishing that goal. And if you're a beginner, I think there's a ton of really cheap decks to get into that are still going to remain very competitive. At one point, we had Tempo Blue with Termander and Curious Obsession. That deck hasn't changed. It's just gone stronger with Sea Dasher Octopus, for example. And this was an incredibly easy to collect budget deck back in the day, very similar to the mono red that we mentioned. Mono green is an incredible place right now as well. And again, Historic strengthens things. It's never taking away from your deck. When you have a deck that you're playing right now as a beginner or a free-to-play individual that's kind of working with you and you're upgrading it, when you bring it into Historic, you basically get a ton of free upgrades. There are a lot of powerful commons and uncommons that can accessorize a particular archetype.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to touch on, and it's something that I don't think Arena does the best job with, and that is separating their actual play modes. Right now, you go to hit play, and it's just all one big old list, like top to bottom, and you sort of got to sort through it. And if you don't know what some of the play modes are, or if you don't know what any of them are, minus standard play, it can get very, very confusing. So if you are a new player, I recommend one of two things. One, do what I did, and I went through and just played one of everything, just to try it, Or, alternatively, if you don't want to spend all the money and gold and all that stuff, because I understand that, go watch a video on each one of them, and familiarize yourself with what is available to be played, instead of just hopping onto Arena every single day and hitting that play button, staying in that one lane. Because while they don't do the best job of saying, hey, up here there's a new game mode, because it's hidden by all these other game modes, actually explore within that bar, explore all their game modes, because again, the organization isn't the best, but just because things aren't separated doesn't mean that they're not whole formats, so to speak, right? Because Brawl and Historic and all that, they're sort of all lumped together, and there's no real way of telling if you're new, hey, this has completely different decks than this, and so on and so forth, right? So if you're curious about something, go into it.
Yeah, always look things up. On that note, there is a hidden play mode, you guys, in the play queue. Click it, and instead of it'll display all of your standard decks. Top left, it'll say standard, and then to the right of standard will say all. Click the all, and that will bring up all of your decks, and you can play your historic decks in play queue, which is normally hidden. It's been hidden for a long time. I don't know why it's not got its own queue, but that's the way it is. And honestly, that's where a lot of the funnest Magic that I've had has taken place, is within the historic play queue. There's just everything you see all day long.
And you definitely get the experience of opponents. Like I feel like I see more decks there than ever. Like one of my favorite things is playing up against a deck. I'm like, what are they playing? Like I have no clue what they're doing. I don't get that anymore in standard or anywhere else, because like I play often enough that I know exactly, like you were talking about, breeding pool comes out, I already know exactly what the rest of this game's going to be. I might see black maybe in its soul tie versus Bant, but most likely we're going to be playing Bant and we're going to be doing this, like type of thing. And it's it is nice to know to not know what deck you're playing the moment one land comes out. So
I got smashed by a Folk Tribal deck the other day. I was just like, what is this?
That's another deck that I think is always going to be in the meta, is Merfolk's. Merfolk is good. Like they got some really powerful stuff. I think that they actually got a Lord in the last what's it called? Historic Anthology that was really powerful, that bumped it up. Also, another thing too. So Bant Ramp. If you are someone that's playing standard and has a really good deck, talking just about like decks that are in standard that are powerful, that are going to still be standard in historic. I think MGG Goldfish was showcasing the Bant Ramp deck up against one of the best modern decks, and it's still powerful. Like it beat it, like it destroyed it. Type of thing where like Bant Ramp is just a really powerful standard. It's a really powerful deck right now. It's really well put together. If you have all those cards for that one, you can literally just play that in historic as well, and it will do probably worse like percentage wise, but still be competitive and still like get you into the format and doing stuff. So I think that's another way to go.
I would actually argue it's almost more competitive in historic, because your opponents will be playing such a wider field of other things. They may not be expecting Bant Ramp every game, and if you're just there with it, you're just chilling.
Thanks for ruining the meta, bro.
I know, right? So another way to get historic cards, if you're trying to do this, and so again, we were talking about all the different options in the play queue. There's also constructed events. So you can jump into a historic constructed event and help. And so it's 500 gold to get into the event. I think it's more if it's a best of 3 event, but you also get more out of it. But then if you have a certain number of wins, you get more gold. And so basically, if you feel like you have a deck that is powerful, I usually jump into these queues as well, because I see a lot of different decks. Like that's usually when I'm coming in to just play something fun. You go in there, you get up to like, you can get quite a bit of gold out of winning a lot of games, up to 7 games. But you can also get a bunch of cards that come out of it. You can get rare cards, you can get whatever based off the number of wins you get as well. And if you're in the historic constructed event, you'll get historic cards out of that. And so that's another way to kind of go with it. If you don't have a lot of historic cards, if you're trying to find something else, that will also increase your overall card deck. So you can take a standard deck. So this is how you can create a standard deck and build up a historic thing, is play in the historic queue and win as many games as you can, get gold out of it, be able to use that gold to buy Jumpstart packs or whatever, but then also get some wild cards or get some cards out of winning there on historic as well, which is a good way to go about it.
Just make sure you're taking a finely tuned deck that you're used to playing, not a brand new deck that you just started playing, but something that you're familiar with, you're sure of yourself with, you've got all of the interactions for the meta kind of mapped out, the different play lines, and go win yourself some individual card rewards and some gold. And I think if you break 4 wins, you're making money. So if you can consistently play above like a 60% win rate, you're good to go.
Yeah, not that hard. Not even pro players can do it, but it's not that hard.
This is why we recommend having the finely tuned deck, and recommend that people farm these the constructed events and the historic constructed events. especially if they're beginners with the mono red deck, because the time commitment is low. It's not like every match is a 35-minute Bant match or an Esper lockout, something like this. They're really quick. They should be like 3 to 5 minutes. You win or you lose. And not only is it easy to collect, easy to construct because of the lack of wild cards required for it, but the win rate for how easy it is like incredibly high. So I always recommend that people either start out mono red or mono blue to start farming these events. Like start out with those decks, get them built up and upgraded to the point where you're able to get those wins consistently, and then hit the constructed events to farm out your collection.
Also, for newer players, and this goes heavily towards me because when I first entered, and even still now, the complexity of some decks is just like an immediate no. Whenever I first entered, if you had told me, "Hey, Chance, go play a control deck with planeswalkers," I'd be okay, yeah, no, not gonna happen. But that's the nice thing about.
I have a really
red.
cool analogy for this, I guess. I don't know. So I think of exactly what you said is perfect. There's like an amount of player fortitude or knowledge base that's required to play certain decks because they interact with the meta differently. So I like to think of aggro decks as kind of being like, and we pilot the decks, right? So I'm using airplanes, which they're pilots as well. So an aggro deck is like an Airbus. You get in it, it's like the Tesla 10,000. You press the big red button, it flies itself, right? It lands in its destination. You get there, you didn't have to do anything while you're there. You just have to like flip them sideways, right? Then we get into like the ramp and mid-range decks, which are a little more complex. A few more pieces have to go into place. So you get into the airplane. There's like a lever, a switch. You turn the key, and now you hold the throttle while you play it, right? And now you have to land the ship manually. That was you. That's great. Now you get into the control decks. It's like an F-15 fighter jet. You're more likely to crash and burn and kill yourself than being shot down by your opponent. So it's just about really knowing exactly what everything does and not using things that you shouldn't use until it's time to use them, right? You don't want to be popping off those flares before your enemy's even shot. But you're totally right. It does come down to player skill or player comfortability, or like how much time they've spent with the different archetypes, because they're different. They require a different amount of like input.
I'm going to come out there and say that I'm an aggro player, and I disagree completely with the different types. I feel like I have way more complex decisions in aggro than I have in control at any time. Just throwing that out there. I feel like mid-range is definitely the easiest one to play. Throw out removal, play big things, smash with big things. I think control and aggro kind of have a really tight, especially when you're playing aggro versus control, one of the hardest times trying to decide what you're going to be doing. That's just me.
I think this is like an ongoing argument for Magic players. No, my deck's harder to play. No, my deck's harder to play.
Is a turn 3 Annex hard to play into a turn 4 Embercleave? And then if it gets wiped, I guess shelve the Embercleave and play the Torbrad instead.
There's always arguments.
Are you on the draw? Are you on the play? Are you needing how much are you trying to commit to the board? All this kind of stuff. Yeah, all that goes into it for sure.
Do you have a draw hand with your 3 land in it?
Where control is just like, oh, do I counter this? Yes, I do. Okay. I don't want them to play.
No, you.
Right. All we do is counter, and then we board wipe, and then we put down the big threat and do almost nothing else besides interact. Like, so it's actually a very big difference. Instead of trying to actually go for going for the win con, all you do is interact at the beginning and then throw out a win con at the late game. It's a very different gameplay. I'm just saying it's not as difficult as aggro sometimes.
I think it's more difficult because you have to distinguish between which cards to counter. You can't be countering a growth spiral, right? You don't want to counter Uro that's just going to get played again from the escape. You have to really know the whole meta, not just your deck, because a red deck, you just turn it sideways. I love red decks, but I could go with this for a while, I feel like.
Yeah, I'll be the middleman, and look, I'm bad with all of them, so it doesn't matter, smash face, control, I misplay left and right.
I get what you're saying with like a tempo blue where you put your flash creature and then you counter everything every turn, but in an Esper deck you don't have that option because there's not so many counters burned through and not the greatest draw engine that hits every turn.
I also think this is one of the great things about Magic is, you know, everybody has their mid-range decks that they love, their control decks that they love, and the great thing is, even if you're someone that loves aggro or control or somewhere in the middle, you can find a version of the other that you enjoy. So like HGG is saying, you know, if you don't enjoy the mono red decks because they are turn and, you know, whatever,
And
don't
burn,
offend
baby.
anybody. But if you enjoy aggro decks, maybe do play a mono blue sort of tempo deck. It's not fully aggro, but you're getting the same sort of feel of cheap creatures, cheap deck, huge payout for it if you're piling it right, right?
I think that if you guys are listening on podcasts and not watching this and can't hear our massive smiles as we're arguing about this, like this is all in good fun. You know, having played for quite a while, each of us, you know, we definitely have leaned towards things that we like more versus the other. And definitely, I've apparently experienced way more when it comes to aggro than EGG has. So that's fine. That's cool. But uh, no, I think overall, just as Dr. Spelkin is saying, is that there's the whole point of this is it's a game, it's fun, it's okay to kind of settle into what you're trying to do. This is the reason I do argue this point though is between aggro, like people saying that aggro is mindless, is a lot of people that do feel like they like aggro more. Everyone telling them that they're brain dead for playing it is always a frustrating thing to me. I feel like I feel like it's actually really dangerous for the culture for that to continue, and that's why I always argue it back because I think that I disagree with it. I do think that aggro has as many hard plays at times as control. I wouldn't say one more than the other, but I think that learning. I think especially as a new player, yeah, it's easy to just play all your creatures and swing in, and that will win you games in an aggro deck more so than control. But as you get into competitive play, there's a very big difference of okay, do I play this? I have to know every single card potentially that's in his hand? You know, that kind of thing. Like all of that comes into play where you have to know every single thing that could potentially happen, and that's where you get to more competitive play. Anyway, so I just wanted to say why we are arguing that, why that's fun. But when it comes down to it, when you're trying to be competitive, I think this is really what it comes down to is knowing what's in the format. And again, bringing it back to the whole point of this podcast, while we're jumping into historic and why we think this is so important is it's a format that is going to be big. I think that we all recognize that it's a format, especially the amount of love that Wizards of the Coast is putting into it. You're not going to want to be jumping into this a year from now. If you are watching this, you've been debating between standard or historic or doing whatever. It's worth jumping into it just the fact that you will know what's in the format. You know, you become 10 times more competitive when you can see one land played and know if it's going to be Bant Ramp or whatever, that kind of thing. That's the reason why I think some of us are better in standard is being able to know what's coming. I think that knowledge is what makes the difference. You brought this up earlier, HEG, the difference between the person that's playing for 30 years versus the person that's just a new beginner. Not so much knowing what to do with my own cards, but knowing what's happening, what's coming on their side of the board. That changes everything.
Yeah, I feel
think
like
that
I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say I feel like every Magic deck essentially comes down to the same thing with trying to play it, and that is when are you pulling the trigger on your cards. You know, control decks, I feel like they do sort of understand this a little bit better at the base. You don't just want to play a card as soon as you have the mana for it, and I think that's what Jeff is saying with aggro is like, yes, you can more oftentimes just spend your mana and win the game. There's also that huge factor of, well, a lot of the times you don't want to just spend your mana because then the turn 4 board wipe is going to kill all your stuff. So it's like, you know, whether it's historic, whether it's standard, know when you're playing your cards and value your opponent's deck as much as you value your own. So if you're looking at a card and you're saying, well, that's maybe not the best thing that they have, don't pull the trigger. Don't remove it. Save that removal for later. And even if you're wrong and it costs you the entire game, you learn. Next time you're gonna remove it immediately, right? So just learn in each match of Magic rather than as soon as you lose or as soon as you win, counting it as written off. You know, learn from every match, whether you're losing, winning, whatever. Learn from your opponents and learn from your own mistakes, right?
I think the most important thing this is the only place you guys are going to get to witness these kinds of conversations. So make sure to share this podcast out to a friend. And then on that note, what I was going to say?
You're going to say that you're right, Jeff. Aggro is bad.
Jeff, you're
I'm sorry.
always to think about withholding. You shouldn't use into this again, but do you have to think about withholding your mana and not playing an Annex in fear of a board wipe, or do you play your Annex into the board wipe knowing that it'll hit anyways?
I don't know.
Anyways, I love mono red as much as the next guy. Trust me, I'm just I'm
and girl.
devil's advocate, I guess. Not really. I guess Jeff is being the devil's advocate. Anywho, maybe we'll have to play some aggro matches.
Yeah. All right, so I know this was a bit of a sort of scattered out podcast, but with Jumpstart coming out and with there being so many new things to Historic within the next month or so, we didn't want anybody jumping into the format or any format really with being clueless or feeling like you didn't have all the information. So we tried to pin the dots for everybody today and connect them and draw a pretty little picture, and we hope that we accomplished that successfully and didn't just talk a bunch of jargon that nobody understands. Any closing thoughts from y'all two on Jumpstart, the new Historic, anything we might have touched on?
I remembered my brain farts. I would rather know my opponent's deck than my own. I get to draw my own cards. I get to read them in real time. Yes, it's really important to know how your cards interact with your own deck. But if I had a choice between knowing my deck and knowing my opponent's deck, I would rather know my opponent's deck. So no matter what play mode you're in or what different game mode that you're playing within MTG Arena, whether it's limited, historic, or standard, the most beneficial skill set you'll have is knowing the meta, understanding it, kind of being able to gauge the environment. It's something that you just begin to understand, and it's like 1,000 pieces working together. And it just will really help your decision-making process be the best that it can possibly be.
Yeah.
Any Jeff, you got any closing thoughts on Jumpstart, Historic, control aggro? Not to stoke the fire, but
I said what I need to say on that topic, but yeah, just I think you guys have felt my passion throughout this whole video. Just on, I think Historic is something, if you still haven't decided to try it yet, do it. Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Do it. Yeah, seriously, it's a great. I'm really excited for it. I think that we're all going to be creating good content for it. I guess we're just going to say, like, we do recognize a lot of people are hesitant to be jumping in, and I'm hoping that we address a lot of the concerns that you guys have for jumping into it. I recognize, if you're playing free to play, all that kind of stuff, yeah, sticking in standard, especially trying to find that good deck that's there, is a way to go for sure. But hopefully you can at least check out our content and at least enjoy it as we are creating, decks around all this awesome stuff that's coming out. So I'm just saying I'm excited. I hope you guys get excited as well.
Yeah,
and if you're anything like us, it's all about having fun, and the standard meta is gonna continually stay pretty aggressive, sweaty. There's always going to be 4 to 5 top meta decks that people all push towards, and then 70% of the people within standard rank will be playing those decks. You're not going to get that as magnified within historic. It's going to be a lot lighter. There's going to be a lot more random jank. It's going to be a lot friendlier to the average individual. So it's if you're ever upset with the standard situation, with not having all of the wild cards, with getting burned by the same deck over and over and over, this is the perfect time to jump over, and I know we're all looking forward to bridging the gap between you guys and Historic in the following months.
Yeah, and one more thing, I just thought about this in the end. When you're going to spend your wild cards and you're looking at Historic, remember this. Whether it's a year or next month or 2 months away or whatever, eventually all the cards that are in Standard will be part of Historic. So, you know, even with rotation coming up and you may not like historic, if you're playing standard so much that you have these top tier meta decks, that means you probably have a solid historic base already to work off of, you know. So don't be one too afraid of going and spending wild cards on historic cards, because eventually all your cards are going to be historic, right? So like HGG saying, like, have fun with it. And on that note of all your cards eventually being historic, Magic is one of the only games I've found that the fun didn't decrease over time, rather just the opposite, it increased. The more cards I got access to, the more I played, the more I understood, the more I found myself wanting to play this game, and it be the only game I played, right? When I first started out, I was like, wow, there's like 1,000 cards and it's so overwhelming. And most games are quite the opposite. Once you learn them, they become old, you don't want to play it anymore. I'm telling y'all, with Magic, it's the kind of game that you play for 6 months or a year, and then you have the time of your life. Yes, the first 3 months are going to be fun. Exactly, right? It's, yes, the first few weeks, they're going to be fun, but they're also going to be crazy and maybe a little stressful because there's so much going on. Just stick with it. Stick to what you know. Stick to having fun. And 2-3 sets down the line, you know, you're going to have a big enough collection to actually get in the ring with some of these top contenders. And if you're not taking it too seriously, you're going to have had a fun time all along the way, right?
Well, like, as a new player, I'd almost like to recommend the play route of you play your first season, your first rotation season until the renewal season in standard, and then once you've put in that year or whatever it happens to be until that hits, then you jump into historic, right? So if you're brand new to the podcast, it's your first time listening, Zendikar Rising just came out, maybe you're a little bit late to the show here. Don't be worried about jumping into all the historic fun that we've been popping off about today. Play standard. It's a brand new standard pool that's very small because it's just been trimmed. So it's going to be a really friendly environment for you there as well.
Alrighty. I think that's going to just about do it for today's podcast. We went a little bit long, so we'll try to trim up some stuff. Of course, leave the heated debates in there for everybody. If y'all enjoyed the podcast or are enjoying the podcast, we can't stress it enough. 1, your support is awesome and appreciated. 2, go share it with a friend. Make their lives better by introducing them to us, basically. That's what I'm saying. We're on SoundCloud. We're on Spotify. My lazy ass still hasn't gotten to Apple Podcasts, so I do apologize about that. But, you know, we're out there. If you want to find us, it's on YouTube. I highly, highly recommend, if you're on my channel watching this, go check out MTG Jeff. Go check out Hello Good Game. They have awesome content. And if you're on their channel, hey.
Sir. I think we have daily uploads on each of our channels, and then we all stream on Twitch as well. So we're looking forward to having a conversation with you.